Rashid had lived a life of hard work and sacrifice. From the time he was a young man, he had known what hunger felt like, what it meant to walk in worn-out shoes, and how it felt to sleep with an empty stomach. Those years of struggle had shaped him into a man who valued every coin and respected every honest effort. When he married, his only dream was to give his family a better life than the one he had known. He opened a small shop in the local market, selling simple goods. It was not much, but day after day, year after year, Rashid worked from sunrise until late at night. His wife often begged him to rest, but he only smiled and said, "Let me work while I have the strength. Our children must never know the pain of poverty." Time passed. His shop grew. He bought more goods, gained loyal customers, and slowly expanded into other businesses. Rashid never lived with luxury. His clothes were plain, his meals simple, and his house modest. But his eyes always shone with pride when he looked at his 3 children, Imran, Hina, and Faraz. They were his treasure, his reason to live. When his wife passed away after years of illness, Rashid poured all his love into raising them. He refused to remarry, saying, "My children are my life now. They need me more than anyone." The years rolled on, and Rashid's sacrifices bore fruit. One day, after decades of struggle, his business was sold for an unbelievable amount, $64 million. Rashid felt both joy and relief. He whispered a prayer of thanks, not for himself but for his children. In his heart, he thought, "Now they will live in comfort. Now they will have the future I always dreamed for them." But sometimes, wealth reveals the true face of people. At first, Rashid expected happiness. He imagined his children would gather around him, thank him for his lifelong sacrifices, and share a warm family dinner. Instead, he began to hear arguments in hushed voices. At night, behind closed doors, his children quarreled about the money. One evening, as rain poured heavily outside, Rashid sat alone in the living room. The sound of thunder echoed, but louder than the storm were the voices of his children from the next room. "This is our chance," Imran said, his tone sharp. "Father has no need for all this wealth," Faraz added. "He is old. He won't live long enough to enjoy it." Hina, who once used to cling to Rashid's arm as a child, now spoke with impatience. "We have waited long enough. We want our own lives, our own homes, our own freedom. Why should we live under his shadow?" Rashid sat frozen, his heart heavy. Every word struck him like a stone. He had dreamed of giving them everything, and now they were talking as if he was a burden standing in their way. The door suddenly opened. Imran walked in, his face hard and expressionless. "Father," he said coldly, "we've decided it's time you left this house. We will take care of the wealth. You don't need to worry about it anymore." Rashid stared at his son in disbelief. "Leave? This is my home, the house your mother and I built. I raised all of you here." His voice trembled with pain. Faraz appeared behind his brother and shrugged. "You'll manage. We will send you some money later. But for now, you can't stay here." Hina did not even meet his eyes. She only folded her arms and remained silent. The storm outside grew louder as if the heavens themselves were weeping with him. Rashid stood up slowly, his body weak but his dignity unbroken. Without another word, he walked to his small room, picked up his worn coat, and stepped out into the rain. The cold water drenched him instantly. The night was dark, and the streets were empty. He walked without direction, his heart heavier than his steps. He did not shout, did not curse, and did not beg. He only whispered to himself, "This is what my love has earned me." Behind him, the house where he had spent his life grew smaller and smaller. It no longer felt like home. It was only a building where greed now lived. Rashid wandered through the rain, searching for shelter. Every drop that fell on him carried memories: his wife's laughter, his children's smiles when they were young, the nights he had stayed awake to earn money for their school fees. Those moments felt like they belonged to another world, one that had vanished forever. By the time he reached an old roadside shelter, Rashid's clothes clung to his body, and his hands trembled from the cold. He sat down quietly, closed his eyes, and let the rain wash away his tears. That night, as the storm raged on, he realized something he had never imagined before: sometimes, the deepest wounds do not come from strangers but from the very ones you love most. But life is strange. The same children who cast him out into the rain would one day return broken, desperate, and pleading for help. And when that moment came, Rashid would finally see the truth about love, wealth, and family. The rain had not stopped that night when Rashid was forced out of his own house. He sat under a broken roadside shelter, water dripping through the cracks, soaking his shoulders. His old coat clung to his body, and the cold pierced his bones. But the pain inside his heart was sharper than the cold outside. He kept thinking about the faces of his children. Once, those same faces had smiled brightly when he returned home with sweets after a long day of work. Once, those small hands had held his tightly when crossing the busy street. Where had all that love gone? He asked himself again and again. By morning, the storm had calmed, but Rashid's world was still dark. With no home, no money in his pocket, and no friend nearby, he began to walk. His steps were slow, his back bent, but his spirit whispered, "Keep moving. Do not give up." He found a small mosque nearby and sat quietly in a corner. The caretaker, an old man with kind eyes, noticed him shivering and offered him a cup of tea. Rashid thanked him with a trembling smile but spoke little. Pride kept him from explaining what had happened. He simply said, "Life has pushed me outside, but I will manage." For the next few days, Rashid wandered. He slept wherever he could: a bench in the park, the side of an old shop, or sometimes the mosque floor when the caretaker allowed it. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but he refused to beg. Instead, he looked for small tasks. At a vegetable stall, he offered to carry baskets for a few coins. At a tea stall, he cleaned cups in exchange for bread. People were surprised to see such an elderly man doing small labor, but Rashid did not mind. Work had never been his enemy, idleness had. Each evening, as he lay down on the hard ground, he remembered the comfort of his bed at home, the sound of his children's voices, and the meals they once shared together. Tears often wet his pillow of folded arms, but he always whispered the same prayer: "Give me strength to survive this, for my dignity is all I have left." Weeks passed, and slowly Rashid built a rhythm. He became known in the market as the quiet, honest old man who worked with respect. The fruit seller trusted him to watch the stall for an hour. The tea seller gave him extra bread when business was good. A tailor allowed him to sleep in his shop's storage room on cold nights. Though his life had been reduced to the barest necessities, Rashid carried himself with calm dignity. He did not complain. He did not curse his children. Instead, he believed that life was teaching him something new, something about strength beyond comfort. But every now and then, when he saw fathers walking with their children, his heart ached. He thought of Imran, Hina, and Faraz. Were they enjoying the wealth now? Were they living in big houses, driving new cars, eating in expensive restaurants? He hoped they were happy, even though they had thrown him away like an unwanted shadow. One evening, while sitting at the tea stall, Rashid overheard two men talking about a family who had suddenly come into great wealth. The men laughed, saying, "Money changes people faster than time does." Rashid lowered his gaze. He knew they were speaking a truth he had tasted with his own tears. Despite his pain, Rashid never let bitterness consume him. He still prayed for his children each night. He prayed they would one day understand that money cannot replace family, that love is not bought with millions. By the end of the second month, Rashid's health began to weaken. The long walks, little food, and restless nights had taken a toll on his body. Sometimes, dizziness overcame him, and his hands trembled when lifting baskets. Yet, his will was strong. The people in the market respected his spirit and often told him, "Uncle, you remind us that honor is more precious than wealth." Rashid would smile gently and reply, "Wealth comes and goes. But how we treat one another, that is what stays forever." It was on one such evening, as the sun painted the sky with shades of red and orange, that Rashid felt a strange sense in his heart. A quiet voice inside told him that life was about to turn again. He did not know how, but he felt change was near. And he was right. Because as the third month approached, while Rashid continued his humble survival, far away his children were beginning to face storms of their own. The very wealth they had chosen over their father was slowly slipping from their hands. The choices they made with pride were now leading them into regret. They had taken everything from Rashid, even his home. But soon, destiny would bring them back to his doorstep, this time not with authority, but with tears in their eyes. The mansion was grand, with shining floors, tall chandeliers, and rooms bigger than the entire old house where Rashid had raised his family. Expensive cars stood in the driveway, and the sound of laughter and music often filled the air. To anyone passing by, it looked like a house of success and joy. But behind those golden walls, cracks had already begun to appear. At first, Imran, Hina, and Faraz enjoyed the life they had dreamed of. They bought designer clothes, filled their kitchen with rich foods, and hosted parties almost every week. Friends and relatives who had once ignored them now visited often, praising their success and flattering them with sweet words. The siblings soaked in this false attention, believing that they had finally arrived at the life they deserved. But money, like fire, burns if not handled carefully. Imran was the eldest and took charge of most of the money. He believed he was clever enough to invest in big projects. Without much thought, he trusted new friends who promised high profits. Large amounts of money went into businesses he barely understood. At first, there were small returns, enough to make him confident. But soon, the losses began to show. Instead of slowing down, Imran poured in more, trying to cover one mistake with another. Faraz, the youngest, loved to spend. He bought cars, gadgets, and expensive watches. He enjoyed showing off in front of his friends, driving fast on empty roads, and eating at the finest restaurants. To him, money was not for saving but for proving to the world that he was important. Within weeks, his spending became careless. Hina, who once managed the household chores beside her mother, now surrounded herself with people who praised her beauty and wealth. She attended gatherings, dressed in costly clothes, and enjoyed being the center of attention. But those around her were not true friends. They came only because of her wealth. They encouraged her to buy more, host bigger parties, and compete with others in showing off. The three siblings had forgotten the simple life their father had lived. They had forgotten his teachings of patience, savings, and honesty. In their rush to taste every luxury, they failed to notice how quickly their money was slipping away. Arguments began inside the mansion. Imran blamed Faraz for wasting too much. Faraz shouted back, accusing Imran of losing millions in foolish investments. Hina grew frustrated when her brothers refused to give her more money for her social gatherings. The unity they once showed against their father was now breaking apart between themselves. One night, while they were arguing at the dinner table, Hina shouted, "Father would have never let this happen." The room fell silent. For the first time, the memory of Rashid crept into their minds, not as a burden, but as the man who had kept everything steady for years. But their pride silenced them. None of them wanted to admit that without him, they were like ships lost at sea. Meanwhile, the so-called friends around them began to disappear. The business partners who had promised Imran riches stopped answering his calls. The party-goers who filled Hina's evenings moved on to new hosts with fresher wealth. Even Faraz's friends, who once rode in his cars and laughed at his jokes, started avoiding him when he could no longer spend freely. Bills began to pile up. The mansion demanded high costs for electricity, staff, and maintenance. Cars needed repairs. Investments kept failing. The siblings started selling smaller things to keep up appearances. First, some jewelry. Then, one of the cars. Slowly, the shine of their wealthy life began to fade. At night, when the lights were off and silence filled the big house, each of them lay awake with heavy hearts. They thought of their father. They remembered his simple meals, his calm advice, and the way he always managed to keep the family steady even with little. Now, with millions, they could not find peace. Imran sometimes wondered if greed had blinded him. Hina secretly wished she could talk to her father again, even for one evening, to feel safe. Faraz, restless and regretful, walked around the mansion late at night, thinking about the warmth of the small home they had abandoned. 3 months had not even fully passed, and already the weight of wealth felt like a curse. The mansion no longer felt like a dream but like a prison of their own making. The siblings tried to hide their struggles from the outside world, but reality has a way of catching up. News spread that Imran's investments were failing. Creditors started visiting the house, asking for money. The staff in the mansion whispered about unpaid salaries. The siblings' pride was cracking, and fear began to settle in their hearts. It was during one of these fearful nights, when thunder roared again just like the night they had thrown him out, that Hina whispered in a broken voice, "What if we were wrong? What if we should have kept father with us?" Neither brother replied. But in their silence, they all knew the truth. And soon, their pride would bend enough to lead them back to the man they had cast into the storm, Rashid, their father. The mansion that once sparkled with music and laughter had now grown silent. The chandeliers still shone, but their light could not hide the sadness in the eyes of Rashid's children. The servants whispered about unpaid wages. The creditors knocked louder each day. Friends no longer visited, and the grand parties were nothing but a memory. Imran sat in his study late at night, his desk covered with papers. Numbers stared back at him like enemies. He had lost most of the investments. The people he trusted had run away with money, leaving behind only debts. Every night he pressed his forehead against his palms, whispering, "If only father were here, he would know what to do." Hina no longer wore new clothes. The expensive dresses and jewelry she had collected were sold quietly to keep the house running. Her friends, who once admired her, now avoided her calls. Sitting by her window, she often remembered her mother's soft voice and her father's steady hand on her shoulder. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she realized how blind she had been. Faraz, restless as always, paced around the mansion like a man trapped. He no longer drove fast cars because the vehicles had been sold. His friends, who once begged him to join their outings, now laughed behind his back. In his anger, he shouted at his siblings, but inside he was hurting the most. I pushed him out too. I pushed my own father into the rain, he thought again and again. 3 months had passed since that bitter night. The siblings no longer argued about money. They argued about survival. Food on the table was less, bills piled higher, and the mansion felt emptier than ever. Their pride, which once stood like a tall wall, now crumbled piece by piece. Finally, one evening, when the house was silent and hopelessness filled the air, Hina broke down. She sat on the floor of the living room and cried like a child. We have destroyed everything, she sobbed. We threw away the one person who truly cared for us. We chose money and lost everything else. Her brothers stood still. Imran's eyes were heavy, and Faraz's hands shook. For the first time, none of them tried to defend themselves. They all knew the truth. We need him, Imran finally whispered, his voice hoarse. Only Father can help us. He may not have money now, but he has wisdom. He knows life better than anyone. We need his guidance. Faraz nodded slowly, guilt covering his face. But where is he? We threw him out in the rain that night. We never even looked back. How do we find him now? The three of them fell into silence. The thought of searching for their father after treating him so cruelly felt unbearable. Yet desperation left them no choice. The next morning, for the first time in months, the siblings left the mansion not in cars but on foot. They began to search the streets, asking people if they had seen an old man with kind eyes and a humble manner. At the market, some remembered him. Yes, said a fruit seller, there is an old man named Rashid. He often helps us carry goods. Another shopkeeper added, he is honest and hard-working. He never begs. He works even when his body looks weak. The siblings were shocked. Their father, who had once given them everything, had been working small tasks just to survive. Shame filled their hearts. Hina covered her face with her scarf as tears welled up. Imran's steps grew slower, and Faraz bit his lip, unable to look anyone in the eye. They continued their search, following every little clue. Some said Rashid had slept in the mosque. Others said he stayed near a tailor's shop. Each person spoke of him with respect, calling him uncle and praising his dignity. The children realized that even without money, their father had earned more honor than they ever had with millions. As the sun began to set, they finally reached a small tea stall at the corner of the market. The stall owner pointed toward a quiet figure sitting near the wall. That's him. He comes here often for a cup of tea. The siblings froze. Their father sat on a wooden bench, wearing the same old coat they had seen on the night they abandoned him. His face looked thinner, his hands weaker, but his eyes were calm. He was sipping tea slowly, unaware that his children were standing just a few steps away. For a long moment, they could not move. Their throats were dry, their hearts heavy with guilt. It was not easy to walk up to the man they had betrayed. But finally, Hina took a trembling step forward, followed by her brothers. Father, her voice cracked as the word left her lips. Rashid looked up, surprised. His children stood before him, their faces pale, their eyes filled with tears. For a moment, silence covered the air. Then Rashid placed his cup down slowly. His expression did not show anger. Instead, it showed something deeper, pain mixed with love. The children fell to their knees. Imran spoke with a broken voice, "Forgive us, Father. We were blind. We chose wealth over you. Now we have nothing left. We beg you, please come back with us." The market fell quiet as people watched. Rashid looked at his children, his heart torn between the wounds of the past and the love he could never fully erase. And in that moment, destiny held its breath, waiting for the old man's reply. The marketplace grew silent when Rashid's children knelt before him. The evening light fell softly on his tired face, showing the deep lines of struggle carved by the last 3 months. His hands, once strong from years of hard work, now trembled slightly as he placed his teacup aside. For a long while, he did not speak. His eyes moved from Imran to Hina, then to Faraz. Each of them looked broken, their pride gone, their eyes filled with shame. The same children who had once stood tall in arrogance were now bent in sorrow before him. Finally, Rashid sighed deeply. His voice was calm, but it carried the weight of his pain. "Why now?" he asked quietly. "When the rain fell that night, did you not see your father standing outside? When I begged with my eyes, did you not feel even a little mercy? Why now, after 3 months, do you call me father again?" The words cut into the children like a knife. Tears rolled down Hina's cheeks as she whispered, "We were blind, Father. We thought money could replace everything. But it only brought us emptiness. Every day without you has been a punishment. Forgive us, please." Imran bowed his head. "I thought I was wise enough to manage wealth, but I was foolish. I lost most of it in greedy hands. I remember your words about patience, but I did not listen. Forgive me, Father." Faraz pressed his hands together, his voice shaking. "I wasted money to show off, but it left me with nothing. I pushed you out that night, and I regret it every hour. If you wish to punish me, do it. But do not turn your face away. We need you, Father." Rashid listened, his heart heavy. The old wounds inside him began to stir. He remembered the stormy night when he had been thrown out of his own home. He remembered the hunger, the cold, and the shame of sleeping in strange corners. He remembered walking alone while his children enjoyed luxury inside the mansion. But along with the pain, another memory rose in his heart: the days when his children were small, their hands clutching his fingers, their innocent voices calling him Abba. He remembered their laughter in the small house, the way they hugged him after he returned from the market, and how they once looked at him with love, not greed. A father's heart is strange. It can be hurt deeply, but it cannot stop loving. Rashid closed his eyes for a moment, whispering a prayer for guidance. When he opened them, his voice was firm yet gentle. "My children," he said slowly, "I suffered, but I did not curse you. I worked with these old hands to eat bread, but I never prayed for your downfall. Do you know why? Because no matter what you did, you are still my blood. You are still the children your mother and I raised with love. I cannot erase that love from my heart." The siblings sobbed harder. The people in the market stood silently, many wiping their own eyes at the sight of a father speaking with such forgiveness. "But forgiveness," Rashid continued, "does not mean forgetting. You threw me away when I needed you most. If you truly want me back, you must change not only in words but in actions. Wealth is nothing without respect, and respect begins with family." Hina nodded quickly, wiping her tears. "We will change, Father. We promise." We don't care about money anymore. We only want you. Imran added, come home with us. Teach us again how to live with dignity. Without you, the mansion feels like an empty shell. Faraz held his father's hands tightly. Give us another chance, father. Let us be your children again. Rashid looked at their faces. His heart, though scarred, softened with compassion. Slowly, he placed his hand on Hina's head, then on Imran's shoulder, and finally on Faraz's arm. I forgive you, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. Not because you deserve it, but because a father cannot hold anger forever against his children. I will come with you, but remember this time, it is not money that will bind us together. It must be love, respect, and unity. The siblings cried in relief. They kissed their father's hands, thanking him again and again. Around them, the people in the market whispered blessings, moved by the old man's grace. As Rashid stood up, supported by his children, he felt weak in body but strong in spirit. He had lost his home, his wealth, and his comfort. But in that moment, he felt he was gaining something greater, the chance to rebuild his family, not with millions, but with love. That evening, as they walked back together, the market lights glowing softly behind them, Rashid whispered to himself, perhaps this storm was needed. Perhaps only through loss could they learn the value of what truly matters. The journey was not over. The debts, the broken reputation, and the emptiness left by greed were still waiting at the mansion. But now, with his fatherly wisdom and his children's humbled hearts, a new chapter was about to begin. When Rashid stepped inside the mansion again, the walls seemed taller, the rooms wider, and the silence heavier than ever before. He looked around slowly, his eyes moving from one corner to another. The furniture was polished, the chandeliers glittered, but there was no warmth in the air. It was not the kind of home he and his late wife had built with love, it was only a house made of bricks and pride. His children followed him, walking behind with lowered heads. For the first time, they did not feel proud of the mansion. They felt ashamed that such a grand place had been empty without their father's presence. Rashid sat down in the living room chair. His children stood before him like students waiting for their teacher's words. His voice was calm, but his tone carried strength. This house has beauty, but no peace, he said slowly. Money filled it, but love abandoned it. Do you see now what happens when wealth is valued more than family? The siblings nodded silently. Their eyes glistened with tears, and their hearts ached with regret. Rashid continued, we had a small home once. It had fewer rooms and no chandeliers. But in that home, we had joy, laughter, and togetherness. That was wealth too, the kind that never fades. Do you understand the difference? Yes, father, Hina whispered. We understand now. Without you, this mansion felt like a cage. Rashid leaned forward, his tired hands resting on his knees. Listen carefully. Wealth is a blessing, but only if it is used with wisdom. Greed makes it a curse. You wasted what I earned with sweat and sacrifice because you forgot the value of patience and humility. Imran lowered his head. I invested without thinking, chasing quick profit. I should have remembered your lessons. Faraz sighed. I wasted on useless things, trying to show off. I was wrong. Rashid nodded gently. Mistakes are part of life. But if you learn from them, they become teachers. If you repeat them, they become chains. Now tell me, are you ready to learn? Yes, father, all three said together. From that day, Rashid began to guide his children step by step. He made them sell unnecessary luxuries, extra cars, jewelry, and other items that drained their money. Keep what you need, he said, and let go of what feeds only pride. He taught them to manage expenses wisely. Imran started keeping a simple notebook of every coin that entered and left the house. Rashid would check it each evening, explaining where savings could be made. Hina, who once spent hours in gatherings, now took charge of the kitchen and household. She learned to cook simple meals again, remembering the days when her mother had taught her. She discovered that real respect did not come from showing off wealth, but from keeping a home filled with care. Faraz, restless by nature, was guided toward honest work. Rashid encouraged him to help in the market, not with grand business deals but with small, steady tasks. At first, Faraz resisted, but when he saw his father's calm smile each time he returned with a day's honest earnings, his heart slowly changed. He felt a dignity he had never felt even while driving the most expensive car. In the evenings, the family sat together. Rashid spoke to them about their mother, about the hardships they had once faced, and about the simple joys they had lost in greed. Sometimes his words brought tears, sometimes smiles, but always lessons. Day by day, the mansion began to change. It no longer echoed with loud parties but with the quiet sound of unity. Meals were shared at the same table. Laughter returned, not forced but genuine. The siblings found comfort in their father's wisdom and guidance, realizing how empty their lives had been without him. But Rashid never let them forget the pain of their actions. I forgave you, he reminded them, but remember the stormy night when I stood in the rain. Do not let greed blind you again. If you forget this lesson, you will lose more than money, you will lose your souls. The children nodded each time, their hearts marked with guilt but also filled with determination to change. Slowly, people in the market and community began to notice the difference. The gossip about their downfall faded, replaced with respect for their humility. Many said, Rashid's presence has saved that family. Others whispered, a father's heart is stronger than any wealth. One evening, while sitting with his children under the soft glow of a single lamp, Rashid looked at their faces and thought of his late wife. He whispered in his heart, they have lost much, but maybe this was the path they needed to find true meaning. Perhaps this is how they will learn to value what we once had. The storm had broken them, but also rebuilt them. Rashid knew their journey was not over. Debts remained, challenges lay ahead, but now they were walking together with him, not against him. And that made all the difference. The mansion, once silent and empty, had slowly begun to breathe again. The laughter of Rashid's children was quieter now, but it was genuine. The halls no longer echoed with the emptiness of greed, but with warmth, care, and the soft hum of family life. Rashid observed them with a heart that carried both past pain and present hope. He knew the journey of rebuilding trust and humility would take time, but he was patient. Patience had always been a part of him, and now it became the foundation of his family's second chance. The first task Rashid set for his children was simple, understanding the value of effort. Each morning, the three of them joined him in small work around the house and the neighborhood. They helped neighbors carry goods, clean the garden, and organize daily tasks with dedication. It was not glamorous work, but it taught them the meaning of responsibility and respect. Imran, who had once invested blindly, began managing the remaining finances cautiously. He created a budget, saved carefully, and learned to plan for the future. Rashid would check his calculations every evening and guide him gently. Slowly, Imran began to understand that money alone could not bring happiness. Wisdom, honesty, and care were more valuable than millions. Hina rediscovered the joy of simple life. She prepared meals with love, took care of the household, and helped her younger neighbors with small tasks. She realized that respect comes from actions, not wealth. Her smile, once forced, now returned naturally, and she felt a pride deeper than any diamond necklace could give her. Faraz, restless and impulsive, learned patience. He spent mornings helping Rashid in the garden and afternoons assisting in the market. The small tasks that once seemed insignificant now gave him a sense of accomplishment. For the first time, he understood what his father had always tried to teach them: dignity comes from contribution, not possessions. Together, the family faced their challenges bravely. The mansion's debts were slowly paid with careful planning and consistent effort. Old friends who had abandoned them began to notice the change. The market community, once doubtful, started respecting the siblings for their humility and honesty. Rashid's guidance and the children's sincere efforts began to repair not only the mansion but also their reputation. One evening, Rashid called them together in the living room. The sun was setting, casting warm colors across the walls. He looked at each of their faces and said, "3 months ago, I stood outside in the rain because my own children had chosen wealth over love. I will not hide that it hurt me deeply. But you came back. You humbled yourselves, and you have started to rebuild what was broken. That is worth more than any fortune." Tears welled up in Hina's eyes. "Father, we understand now. Money without love and respect is nothing. You are our true wealth. Without you, we were empty." Imran added, "We promise to never let greed control us again. We will honor what you taught us and live with care, humility, and love." Faraz smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. "Father, we lost everything, but we gained what matters the most: you. Please forgive us for our mistakes." Rashid embraced them one by one. His arms were frail, but his heart was stronger than ever. "I have already forgiven you," he whispered. "Love is never lost, even when tested. Now, let us move forward together." From that day on, the mansion transformed not with material luxury, but with warmth. Even the neighbors noticed the change. Children played in the yard, laughter floated through the halls, and small acts of kindness replaced extravagance. Rashid's teachings became part of daily life. The children learned to share, to give without expectation, and to value family above everything else. Months later, the siblings reflected on what they had endured. They realized that the loss of wealth and the fear of failure had taught them lessons that money could never buy. They had learned humility, patience, and, most importantly, the power of family. Rashid had turned their misfortune into a lesson of life, and they were determined never to forget it. Rashid, sitting on his favorite chair by the window, watched the sunset one evening. His heart was full. The stormy night when he had been thrown out seemed like a distant memory now. The children who had caused him pain had grown wiser and kinder. They had returned not because of wealth, but because they understood love. He whispered softly to himself, "This is what I hoped for all along. Not riches, not fame, but a family that stands together, through storms and through calm. This is true happiness." The mansion, once a symbol of greed and loss, now stood as a beacon of hope and unity. Rashid's heart was finally at peace, knowing that his children had learned the greatest lesson life could teach, that love, respect, and family are worth more than all the wealth in the world. And together, they stepped into a future brighter than any gold or diamond could ever promise, walking hand in hand, stronger, wiser, and full of love.